Welcome to Serial Napper, the bedtime podcast for people who fall asleep to true crime. This episode gets dark, so if you're sensitive to graphic content, maybe skip the nightcap. You've been warned. Hey everyone, my name is Nikki Young, and this is Serial Napper, the true crime podcast for naps. I'm back with another true crime story to lull you to sleep, or perhaps to give you nightmares. Baby-faced killer, or a grieving teenager caught in something far darker than anyone imagined? That's the question many are asking about the young lady at the center of a double homicide. At just 16 years old, Sarah Grace Patrick is sitting behind bars after the bodies of her mother and stepfather were discovered inside their Carroll County, Georgia home. On February 20th, 2025, 41-year-old Kristen Brock and 45-year-old James Brock were found in their bedroom, both shot to death. The discovery wasn't made by the police. It was made by the couple's 5-year-old daughter, Jaylee, who went looking for her parents when they didn't get out of bed that morning. A horrifying discovery for any child. Janie alerted her older 16-year-old stepsister, Sarah, who picked up the phone and dialed 911. Somehow, both girls managed to sleep through the night, sleep through whatever violence had been done to their parents. And here's where things get even more unsettling. After their deaths, Sarah was reportedly reaching out to true crime creators online, asking them to cover her parents' unsolved murder. She even promised that she could give them the inside scoop. Let that sink in. It was that kind of behavior that made authorities pause and wonder, was there more to this case than what Sarah was letting on? This is one of those stories that forces you to look twice at the idea of family and safety. Because when we think of threats inside the home, we picture a stranger breaking in, not a teenager turning a weapon on their own parents. Yet that's exactly what investigators believe happened here. Now Sarah is facing 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault. The town is left in shock, asking the same questions that we are. How could this happen, and why? So, dim the lights, put your phone down, and listen as I dig into the story of Sarah Grace Patrick. Is she a cold-blooded teen killer with a sweet face, or a broken young girl caught in circumstances too big to understand? So let's jump right in. Carroll County, Georgia is the kind of place where folks still wave from their trucks when they pass you on the road. Neighbors know each other's businesses for better or worse, and to the Brock family, they seemed, at least from the outside, like just another ordinary household. The parents were described as hardworking and well-liked, though both had a bit of a sordid past. 16-year-old Sarah Grace wasn't a troublemaker at school. She had friends, a social media presence, the kind of life that you would expect from a teenager in a small southern town. But scratch the surface, and things weren't nearly as picture-perfect. Sarah Grace's childhood was chaotic, pulled between her divorced parents and overshadowed by accusations of drug abuse, unsafe environments, and unstable relationships. Before Sarah Grace lived with her mother, stepfather, and step-siblings, she lived with her nuclear family, her mom and dad, and her brother. But things were not happy at home. Her parents struggled deeply to maintain a healthy relationship, and ultimately, everything would fall apart. In 2018, Sarah's biological father, Daniel Patrick, divorced her mother, Kristen Nolan Patrick, after 10 years of marriage. The two shared custody of Sarah Grace and her younger brother, Donnie, but Daniel fought hard for more time with his kids. He claimed Kristen and her then-boyfriend, James Brock, were abusing meth and marijuana, creating what he called an unsafe home. In court filings, he painted a grim picture: drugs in the house, parties where meth was openly used, and even incidents where Sarah, then just 11, told teachers and police about the smell of meth in the home and the places her mom allegedly hid it. There were also allegations of discipline gone too far. Stepfather James was accused of leaving belt marks on little Donnie, and the Department of Family and Children's Services had to step in. Kristen and James weren't exactly strangers to the system either. Court records showed James had a long history with drugs and probation violations. By 2018, he'd already racked up charges for possession of meth, shoplifting, and obstruction. He was technically a convicted felon who wasn't supposed to own a firearm. The custody battle dragged on. It was ugly and bitter. At one point, Daniel temporarily won physical custody of his 2 children, only to have it overturned just days later. Sarah herself even wrote a letter to the court saying that she wanted to live with her dad. But things were constantly shifting. Temporary custody, supervised visits, new allegations flying back and forth. Kristen accused Daniel of drinking around the kids and bad-mouthing her. He accused her of spiraling out of control and exposing their children to dangerous situations, including one disturbing story where Sarah was in a car with her mother and stepfather's intoxicated friends, and she had to cover her face with a blanket to avoid being vomited all over her. By 2020, a judge finally ordered a 50-50 custody split. Kristen agreed to get Sarah into counseling because she had been through a whirlwind. She would split her time between living at her father's home with her little brother and her mother and stepfather's home, where they now had their own child, Sarah's half-sister, Jaylee. And for a while, things seemed to settle down. There were social media posts where Daniel even praised Kristen, saying that they had raised a, quote, beautiful girl together. But the cracks, they were still there. James Brock, Sarah Grace's stepfather, had his own explosive history with Sarah's mother, Kristen. In 2022, he even filed a temporary protective order against her, claiming that she had tried to run him over with their young daughter in the backseat of the car. There were accusations of child cruelty, destruction of property, and threats. Those charges were eventually dropped, and the couple reconciled. By late 2023, they were married in a small ceremony and had become active in their church, telling family that they were turning their lives around. To hear Kristen's father, Dennis, tell it, his daughter and James had found redemption. They'd gotten baptized, they joined their local congregation, and they were trying to put their turbulent past behind them. He insisted that Kristen had been clean, happy, and deeply involved with her church family in the months leading up to her death. Still, rumors swirled about Sarah Grace's own struggles. Friends whispered about mental health issues, and some claimed she had been hospitalized in the past. Her paternal grandmother confirmed that she'd heard Sarah had been admitted to a hospital for undisclosed reasons, though the details were never made public. So, here you have it. A teenager at the center of years of custody fights, allegations of drugs, abuse, and unsafe homes. A mother with a checkered past but a renewed commitment to faith. A stepfather with his own criminal record but a public face of redemption. And a blended family trying to live a normal life in a small southern community, while the truth was far more complicated. No one in Carroll County could have predicted that, years later, that same home would be the scene of a double homicide, and that the daughter caught in the middle of it all would be the one in handcuffs. Now, depending on who you ask, people close to the situation will either tell you that her father was the problem or her mother and stepfather were the issues. No matter who you ask, I think we can all agree that Sarah Grace Patrick did not have an easy childhood. When all of this happened, she was mainly living with her mother, stepfather, and her little stepsister, and she was visiting with her dad on alternating weekends and holidays. Now, according to her biological father, things seemed to be going well with his daughter. She appeared happy, cheerful, and upbeat, her usual self. He said he didn't see any red flags that might indicate that something terrible was brewing below the surface. So, what actually happened on February 20th, 2025? Well, that morning, Carroll County Sheriff's deputies were called out to a quiet home where 41-year-old Kristen Brock and her husband, 45-year-old James Brock, were found dead in their bedroom. Both had been shot. And this didn't appear to be a break-in gone wrong or a tragic accident. Investigators quickly realized that there were no signs of forced entry, nothing had been stolen, and there was no mysterious stranger lurking in the night. Right away, they had a suspicion that whoever had pulled the trigger was already inside the home at the time. The most heartbreaking part? It wasn't the police who made the first discovery. It was the couple's 5-year-old daughter, Jaylee. She'd gone to check why her parents weren't up yet, only to find them dead. That image is something no child should ever have to carry. Jaylee ran to Sarah Grace to wake her up and tell her what she had just discovered. And then it was 16-year-old Sarah Grace who called 911. In the aftermath of her parents' deaths, she even posted about it on TikTok before her account was shut down, writing, quote, "I can't help but hate myself because I didn't wake up to find them before my 5-year-old sister had to find her parents like that." Now, her biological father, Daniel Patrick, remembers getting a call from Sarah that morning around 7:30 a.m. At first, it didn't seem unusual. She often called or texted him before school to wish him a good day. But the call dropped and he brushed it off as a butt dial. Minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, it was the paramedics. They told him to come pick up his daughter. When he asked why, they said Kristen and James were dead. Now, at first, Daniel assumed that it must have been an overdose. He knew Kristen had struggled with prescriptions in the past. The truth was far worse. Both had been shot to death. When Daniel arrived at the sheriff's office, he and Sarah were interviewed. But he says that at one point, while he stepped out for a break, officers pulled Sarah into a separate room and began interrogating her without his permission. She was just 16 years old. Meanwhile, word was already spreading through the community. Police cars swarmed the property, crime scene tape went up, and neighbors began piecing together rumors. Did the couple's murders have something to do with their shady past? They seemed to have their lives together in recent years, so why now? Then there were questions about who was in the home at the time that all of this happened. Could the killer be someone who lived there? In a small southern town like Carroll County, murder is shocking enough. But the idea that a teenage girl might have pulled the trigger, that's the kind of story that makes its way into every church pew and gas station checkout line. If this case wasn't unsettling enough, the funeral, it took it to a whole other level. Because guess who gave the eulogy? Sarah Grace herself. And some people in attendance took issue with the words spoken and how they were said. Standing at the podium in a light blue dress, the 16-year-old broke down as she addressed the mourners. Through tears, she began, quote, "For those of you who do not know me, my name is Sarah, and I am Kristen Brock's daughter and James Brock's stepdaughter. I just wanted to say goodbye to my mom and James since we never got the chance to." She spoke about being so used to having them around that she never imagined life without them, admitting, quote, "I don't have a single clue how much I needed y'all till now." She turned to a photo of James, thanking him for being, quote, "the best bonus dad ever," and saying, "Your heart will finally be healed in heaven, and neither of y'all will be in any pain anymore." She told her mother, "Everything we went through does not define what kind of person or what kind of mother you were. You were a beautiful, kind soul with so much gratitude and so gosh dang strong." Sarah even read a letter that her mom had once written to James, saying it gave her peace and closure. She tried to shift the focus away from the violence, telling the congregation, quote, "I want to remember them for who they were and not what happened to them. Be happy for the time we got to spend together and not sad about the time that we don't." The words grew more emotional, more poetic as she described her mother as her star from up above, saying she could look into the night sky to find her. She ended the eulogy by thanking friends and family for helping her get through my worst nightmare. And her final words, "I'm sorry." And then she stepped away from the podium. For those sitting in the church that day, it must have been haunting. Here was a teenager weeping over her mom and stepdad, talking about loss and grief and the seat that they'd saved for her in heaven. And yet, investigators believed that she was the one who put them in the ground. And so did some of those in attendance at the funeral, especially with that little quote at the end where she said, "I'm sorry." What was she apologizing for? Nobody really knew. It's the kind of moment that makes you question everything that you're hearing. Were those tears of guilt or grief? Was this the performance of a lifetime or the heartbroken words of a daughter who'd lost two people she loved? As investigators quietly built their case, Sarah Grace was busy doing something else, turning to social media. And not in a teen posts sad quotes kind of way. No, she was actively reaching out to true crime creators, trying to generate buzz about her parents' death. At the time, her mother and stepfather's deaths were still unsolved. Maybe she wanted to drive awareness so that she could help catch their killer. One of the people she messaged was Janice, a TikToker from South Carolina who runs the blog Allegedly Reportedly. With more than 100,000 followers, Janice has become a go-to voice in online true crime spaces. Now, early in June, a TikTok account under the name Sarah Grace sent her a blunt message: "Search up Brock case." When Janice asked for context, the account replied, "They're my parents, and out of nowhere, a random Thursday night in February, someone came in my house with me and my 5-year-old sister and shot my parents brutally, leaving them for me and my little sister to wake up to." Janice offered her condolences and said that she'd look into it. The very next day, she got another message from Sarah Grace that struck her as odd. The teen suggested that the case would be, quote, "a really big hit if it got more attention." Screenshots show that once Janice began covering the murders, Sarah Grace even popped up in the comments, chiming in on speculation. When someone suggested that the killer must have known the victims, she replied, "Most definitely was, since they knew the house." In another comment, she confirmed that her parents had been shot. Janice later told police that Sarah went even further, emailing her and sharing details about the crime scene. She would say, quote, "It felt like she was digitally reliving the crime." And Janice wasn't the only one. Another high-profile TikTok creator that you probably know named Mama Tot, who has over 12 million followers, said she also got a message from Sarah. On April 16th, the account reached out with a heartbreaking plea saying, "Mama Tot, I need a mama bad right now. I'm going through it." At the same time, Sarah was using her own TikTok account to post public tributes to her parents. In March, she uploaded a slideshow of family photos set to emotional music, writing, quote, "They don't know it, but a year from now, me and my 5-year-old sister would find them wrongfully shot dead in our home, and they won't get to watch me graduate high school, see me walk down the aisle, or even say goodbye." She captioned it, "I miss you guys. Save a seat for me in heaven." In another post, she confessed, quote, "At nighttime when there's nothing to do and the house is empty, I'd always think about how much I needed them." The account, later confirmed by the sheriff's office as belonging to Sarah, was full of raw, emotional content. A selfie of her crying in bed, a video of her on her way to the funeral, mascara streaked, writing, "This can't be real, on the way to my parents' funeral." To outsiders, it looked like a grieving teenager, mourning her parents in the way that only Gen Z knows how, by broadcasting it online. But when you look back at those messages, the comments, the need to draw attention to the case, some think that it all feels different now, almost like she was narrating her own crime in real time. For weeks, investigators quietly sifted through evidence, interviewing family, pulling phone records, and even taking a hard look at Sarah Grace's tearful eulogy. Finally, the trail pointed in one chilling direction, straight back to the teenager herself. Sarah was with her biological father, Daniel Patrick, when authorities told them that she was their prime suspect. Daniel was the one who helped her to turn herself in. On a Tuesday morning, she walked into the sheriff's office and handed herself over. The sheriff didn't mince words at the press conference that he held later that afternoon. He said, "We feel confident that she is responsible for their murders. She turned herself in because we notified her that we had a warrant for her arrest." But even as they announced the arrest, investigators admitted that the case might not be finished. They weren't ruling out the possibility that others could have been involved. The sheriff said that the team had sifted through mountains of physical and digital evidence in collaboration with the FBI and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's crime lab. Among the evidence they flagged, that eulogy given at their funeral. What looked like raw grief to outsiders, they suggested might have been a performance to cover her tracks. Sarah Grace was officially charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault. Not even old enough to buy cigarettes, and suddenly she was sitting in a courtroom facing the possibility of life in prison. The legal debate was immediate. Should she be tried as an adult? Prosecutors said yes, pointing to the brutality of the crime. And the judge agreed. At her 2-hour bond hearing, prosecutors argued that Sarah should remain locked up. They worried about witness intimidation, especially considering her 5-year-old sister Jaylee, who had been the one to discover the bodies. Grieving relatives backed the request, telling the court that they too feared for their own safety. Quote, "If the defendant can kill her own parents in such a violent manner, I fear for my own safety and the safety of my family and friends," said Kim Bowling, James Brock's sister. Sarah's stepbrother and James's son, Tristan Brock, broke down on the stand, calling his father "my Superman." He insisted that if Sarah was released, she'd, quote, "absolutely attempt to flee rather than stand trial." But Sarah also had defenders in the courtroom. Some family and friends showed up wearing T-shirts with her name across the front. They described her as a church-going teen with no criminal history, a kid who got baptized, prayed with her pastor from jail, and always showed patience and kindness. Her pastor even told the court, "She didn't just show up on Sundays. She clearly found a place where she felt at home." But it wasn't enough. The judge called her a significant flight risk and a potential danger to witnesses. He denied bond. Sarah Grace, now formally charged as an adult, is accused of fatally shooting her mom and stepdad as they slept before leaving her little sister to stumble into the horror of their bedroom. Her trial date is set for January 5th, 2026, pending grand jury indictment. From TikTok tributes to a jail cell, it's a fall that feels almost cinematic, except it's real. 2 people are dead, and their teenage daughter will now stand trial for their murders. I don't know about you, but these kind of stories, they hit different. It's one thing when violence comes from outside the home, a break-in, a robbery gone wrong, some random act of chaos. These things are terrifying, but at least they're somewhat explainable. When it comes from inside the family, though, when it comes from the person you raised, fed, and tucked into bed, that feels like betrayal on a level that most of us can't even comprehend. 2 parents lost their lives. A community lost 2 people who were, by most accounts, kind, hardworking, and loved. And allegedly, their own daughter, the person they poured years into, now stands accused of putting them in the ground. Disturbing doesn't even begin to cover it. Still, not everyone believes that Sarah Grace is guilty. Her maternal grandfather, Dennis Nolan, told News Nation's Banfield that the case doesn't add up for him. He said, "Well, it's hard to make any judgment at this point. They have to release the evidence, and I don't understand what evidence they have. Most of it, from what I understand, is circumstantial. And she's my granddaughter. I have to stand behind her. She swears her innocence. Dennis said that Sarah called him after her arrest, very upset, begging him to help her. He described her as looking up to him like a father figure. He told her to cooperate with investigators, but admitted he still couldn't imagine her doing something this horrific, especially to her mother, who he said that she had a close relationship with. He even floated the idea that maybe this wasn't about Sarah at all, wondering if James Brock's past might have come back to haunt him. Allegedly, he had been involved with a motorcycle gang, and they both had a history with drugs and the lifestyle that comes with all of that. But investigators told Dennis flat out that Sarah was the only person who could have done it. When he pressed them for proof, he said all they'd offer was, she's the only one who could have done it. Because this case is still very much in its infancy, we're going to have to wait to see just what kind of evidence the prosecution brings forward to support that claim. At this point, we don't know if there was DNA evidence found, if there was gunshot residue on Sarah's hands or clothing, where this gun even came from, if she made certain confessions to people or online. We have no idea what they have that has them so convinced that this teenage girl killed her parents while they slept. Sarah's father, Daniel Patrick, has been even more vocal in her defense. He's created a Facebook group to rally support and collect character letters for her upcoming hearings. In one post, he pleaded, "We need people that know Sarah to write character witness notes and statements about her. I'm begging you, write a letter as soon as you can." He's also blasted the media and what he calls rumor mongering. "My daughter is 100% innocent," he wrote. People are quick to judge when they don't even have any info. If it's the media, then you should know how the media portrays everything. It's not about the truth. It's about viewership. He says Sarah voluntarily went into the sheriff's office when the warrant was issued, insisting that she has nothing to hide. He described the agony of having to tell his son that his mother and stepfather were dead, and then walk his daughter into the very office where she'd been accused of causing it. For Daniel, his focus is clear. "Right now, I am trying to focus on my daughter, my children, not what everybody else is focusing on. Believe me, I'm living it. I don't have to see it." So, here we are, 2 parents dead, a teenager facing the rest of her life behind bars, and a family at war with itself. Some see Sarah as a murderer. Others see her as a sweet, church-going kid caught in a nightmare. And the rest of us? Well, we're left asking questions that may never have satisfying answers. Right now, the case against Sarah Grace Patrick is moving towards trial, but the road ahead is messy. Prosecutors insist that they've built their case on what they call mountains of evidence. That includes Sarah's digital footprint, her TikTok posts after the murders, her messages to true crime bloggers, and even the emotional comments that she made during her parents' funeral. They've signaled that this digital trail is at the core of their argument that Sarah wasn't just grieving, she was covering her tracks. But supporters of the defense say that the state is overplaying its hand. They point out that investigators haven't put forward any physical evidence proving that Sarah fired the fatal shots. No DNA, no gun residue that we know of, nothing concrete. That gap has left plenty of room for doubt, and it's already fueling debates both in the courtroom and across Carroll County about just how strong this case really is. Then there's the biggest question of all. Why? Why would a 16-year-old kill her own mother and stepfather? Prosecutors haven't given the public a clear motive. They've hinted at behavioral red flags, but so far, nothing that explains why Kristen and James Brock ended up dead. And without motive, the defense is hammering the idea that the state's case is more suspicion than proof. For now, Sarah remains behind bars with bond denied. Superior Court Judge Dustin Hightower has made it clear that he's not about to let this case drag out forever. "I do not want anyone to sit in jail unnecessarily," he told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. "What I can do is give this young lady speedy justice." He's set a tentative trial date for January 5th, 2026. and he signaled that he won't tolerate any unnecessary delays. Until then, it's a waiting game. The prosecution will polish up its digital evidence, the defense will hammer on the lack of forensic proof, and everyone will speculate about motive. And Carroll County, suddenly thrust into the national spotlight, is left to wonder whether the girl they watched grow up really murdered her parents in cold blood, or whether this story is more complicated than it looks. Lost in all of the headlines about Sarah's arrest and the courtroom drama is the smallest victim in this whole story, 5-year-old Jaylee. She was the one who walked into her parents' bedroom that February morning and saw what no child should ever see. Her innocence ended in an instant, replaced with an image that will stay with her for life. While Sarah sits in a jail cell and lawyers argue over evidence, Jaylee is left without a mother, without a father, and without the stable home every child deserves. Her future will be forever shaped by the horror of that morning and the shadow of her sister's alleged crime. The shock has also echoed through Carroll County. In a town where people still wave at strangers from their porches, the murders shattered the sense of safety. Candlelight vigils were held, church congregations prayed over the family, teachers and classmates whispered about what happened to the girl that they thought they knew. Because this wasn't just a crime scene in a house, it was a crack down the middle of a community, forcing everyone to look at each other and wonder how something so unthinkable could happen right in their backyard. The case of Sarah Grace Patrick is one of those stories that gets under your skin because it doesn't follow the usual script. 2 parents shot dead in their own home, a 5-year-old left to stumble onto the unimaginable, and the daughter, just 16 years old, accused of pulling the trigger. Prosecutors say that the digital trail is undeniable. The defense says that there's no hard proof. Her family is divided, with some begging for her release and others begging the judge to keep her locked up. And through it all, the central question still hangs in the air. Why? What could drive a teenager to allegedly commit the ultimate betrayal? It's disturbing. It's heartbreaking. Was Sarah a cold-blooded killer hiding behind angel eyes, or a broken girl lost in the chaos of a family with too many secrets? Maybe we'll find out when her trial begins in January 2026. Maybe we won't. Maybe we won't ever know. What we do know is this: 2 lives are gone, a little sister's childhood is forever scarred, and a community is left wondering how something like this could happen in their backyard. That's it for tonight's episode of Serial Napper. Thanks so much for listening, and if you're still awake, well, good luck sleeping after this one. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and if you want ad-free early access or bonus content, come hang out with me over on Patreon, patreon.com/serialnapper. Until next time, stay safe, stay weird, and keep one eye open. Bye.